Welcome back once again to another episode of the Alite Show with your co-host, Mike Dowd. We have the mob, the mafia, and the man, and John is, I don't know, not the man.
And we have, for the people who hit the subscribe button, hit the comments, we have a legendary commentator that is an incredible human being and seen it all and then some. So we just want to say hello to Larry. Larry Merchant, how are you?
I'm doing all right for an old man.
Yeah, well, you look fantastic for the people that are listening in and taking a look at him. You still look the same old Larry, actually. Yeah. You're looking good.
Thank you. Your flattery will get you nowhere.
But Larry, I'm Michael Dowd. I'm sure you don't know who I am, and that's fine. But we know who you are, and that's really both an honor and a pleasure. And I'm excited and nervous to talk to you because I'm not a great big boxing fan, but I do remember Cassius Clay and Sonny Liston. And by that, I mean, I remember hearing about it because I was a young lad back then, you know, and now I'm 61 today. So I'm sure you could bring me right back from that day all the way forward. But before we get into that, I want to ask you a question. Name me for me your favorite fight and your favorite fighter. There's got to be, if they're not the same.
Well, my favorite fight, which many people regard as the greatest heavyweight fight, was the third fight between Ali and Frazier in the Philippines.
I fucking the Thriller in Manila. Yeah,
as it turned out to be a real thriller in Manila.
Yeah. Great. Were you had a relationship with these guys on a personal level also, or just in the ring and it was strictly business commentating?
Well, I was around so many of the fights of the elite fighters that we got to know each other. I had interviewed them numerous times. And some of it became a little personal and some of it was just business.
Yeah. You know, I was friendly with Joe Frazier. He was a Philadelphia guy. I had a house outside of Philly. I go to Atlantic City, so I got friendly with him at a certain point later on as he retired. But Muhammad Ali, I had the utmost respect for. I thought, to me, he was one of the greatest fighters ever in the boxing world. But
I agree with you. Joe Frazier learned to fight in Philadelphia when I was sports editor of the Philadelphia Daily News. And I knew him and liked him and invested in him as a kind of stunt when they were putting together a group of businessmen and others to buy shares in Frazier. I bought a share. I'm trying to remember. I know it was not very much money, a couple of $100 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out 3 or 4 months later, I was moving to New York to work at the New York Post. And I needed money for an apartment. And I sold my share for a couple $1,000.
This is crazy.
A couple of years after that, the share was worth a couple of $100,000. He never stopped kidding me about getting out too early.
Wow. That's got to be a story that no one even really knows about. It's crazy. So, Larry, I mean, besides seeing you at some of the high-profile boxing matches throughout the years, I didn't know you were a writer. You were a writer for the Post?
I was a columnist in Philadelphia and New York for 20 years.
Did you know that, John?
Yeah, you know what, Larry, were you familiar with, there's a writer that wrote my book, George Anastasia. Him and his brother used to write for the Philadelphia papers. Did you know any of them back in the day?
The name is sort of familiar to me, but I can't say I knew them.
Yeah. So let me ask you another question.
He didn't get finished my question.
Go ahead. What is it?
I asked him who was his favorite match. He said the Thriller in Manila. Well, who was the, maybe I'll ask it a different way. Who was the fighter that you, I mean, you could say Muhammad, you could Ali, you could say Frazier, but who was the fighter that you most sort of admired, other than the guys that we know, that anybody would know? What guy was really maybe didn't reach his potential, or you know, got stolen?
Well, there were a number of elite fighters that I liked, and because of the nature of my job, those are the ones I went to see. But Leonard, Hearns, and Hagler.
Oh, they were great fights.
They had great fights with each other. They were real old-fashioned fighters. Sugar Ray Robinson once said that Sugar Ray Leonard was better than he was. Maybe Robinson had a couple of drinks, I don't know. but they were just outstanding fighters.
You know, Larry, I did an interview with Jerry Cooney on his show, and I asked Jerry Cooney off the show what he thought about Marciano compared to some of the fighters like, you know, Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, Tyson. Where would you put him with these guys? Sonny Liston, Marciano?
Look, all that a fighter can be, that we can be sure of, is to be the best in his time. Marciano was the best in his time.
Yeah.
Could he have competed with the new age super heavyweights? Probably not. He weighed in the high 180s.
Yeah, I believe right, 186 or something.
At his peak. I interviewed Marciano a couple of or three times.
And in your opinion, I think, in my opinion, one of the greatest trainers ever was Emanuel Stewart. Did you have any kind of conversations, and what'd you think of him?
I thought he was great. He revived boxing in Detroit. Hearns was the major figure in that new wave. But, you know, Emanuel, even though he was in the corner of many champions, he loved it no matter what level. In between big fights, he'd be driving caravans of amateurs to amateur shows.
Yeah.
He really loved it and was a great friend.
Yeah, he was really a gentleman. I met him on a couple occasions, and I really he was just a genuine human being.
Yeah.
Well, I was at his memorial in Detroit. What's her name? The famous singer who sang Respect.
Aretha Franklin. Yeah.
She was there. She sang. It seemed all of the elite Detroit figures were there because he was a citizen and a good man.
Was Jimmy Hoffa there?
Yeah, Jimmy Hoffa in those days.
Well, I don't have the same eyesight I once had to see where he would be buried.
But you got the wits. You got the wits to know how to take a ground ball.
Hey, Larry, here's a question for you. and I'm not sure if you guys ever made up. And I know I'm going to bring up the Mayweather situation. What did you think of that? And did you guys make up after that little bit of
Yes, he apologized.
Oh,
yeah.
A week
That's
or
nice
two
to hear.
later.
that's
A
good.
week or two later.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Okay, well, sometimes that's as simple as that. That's great.
I mean, he's a great fighter, and I got to tell you, he's even better father. His kids are well they brought up with a lot of class, his kids. So he's doing something right with his children. I'll tell you that.
Well, that's good to hear. He's made more money than whole rankings of fighters have in the past.
Wow.
And he did it by being shrewd enough to exploit television and HBO's little 20 or 30-minute pieces on the fighters before the fight. He was very smart.
You were with HBO for what, 35, 40 years? You were with them for a long time, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
How about as far as working with other announcers like Howard Cosell or some of the legendary?
I knew Cosell. I never worked with him.
You work with Lampley, I believe, right? With
I
Jim.
worked with Jim Lampley.
Yeah.
In that great era in the 80s, 90s, Emmanuel, Jim, and me were the team.
Yeah.
Did you ever, Larry? Did you ever watch a fight where, while watching the fight, this guy is not putting out, and you know what I mean? Like the guy was just basically throwing the fight.
Well, I saw a thrown fight, but it was long before I was at HBO.
Oh,
When I came out of the Army in the early 50s, I went to a fight at Madison Square Garden with my uncle, who had fought some amateur fights, as many uncles had in that time.
right.
And Willie Pep was fighting a fighter from East Harlem. I can't think of his name. He was a very good fighter.
Could he catch Willie? Because Willie was lightning.
And Willie went down in the second round.
I caught him.
I mean, Willie Pep does not go down in the second round
For nobody.
or ever.
Yeah.
And in the next day's paper, a great sports writer who I almost worshipped along with a few others, called it a dump, and it turned out to be correct.
Wow. Well, that would have been scandalous. That would have been really...
You have to understand something. Back in that day, fighters or their managerial teams could make more money betting on the fight than they could from the fight itself.
Wow. Yeah.
Now they make
Now it's
so much money that there's no reason
right.
to sabotage your career if you might make $20 million after 3 more wins.
Right. Well, that's really interesting, though, huh? Yeah.
Well, Teddy Atlas is very verbal about some of the inside stuff that goes on in the boxing world, and
he's a keen observer.
Yeah, very knowledgeable guy. I think he's one of the greatest. Also, what I wanted to ask you was, what do you think of now the up and coming UFC and MMA compared to the boxing world?
How come you haven't asked me about the women's boxing?
Yeah, I'm going to get to Christy Martin next because I'm bringing her on.
What, the round girls?
You remember Christy, right, Larry?
I went down to Florida to interview her.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be in Florida next week if you want to join us. You can anytime, Larry.
She was the best schooled women's fighter I had seen up until that moment.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
others modeled themselves on her.
Yeah,
but $1 million for 2 women's women in a fight at the Garden recently, unheard of. One way or another, hand-to-hand combat is going to make a is going to restore itself. Whether it was MMA or UFC or any of those things, which I don't follow, I'm not a big fan of street fights. There's a way they'll get around to having hand-to-hand combat. So if fans love that and want to see it, good. But don't tell me that you can put in a MMA fighter, no matter how good, with a boxer champion and expect him to do anything more than a 4-round fighter could do. Yeah. Ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you. They don't have the same ability as a boxer. But on the other hand, you can't put a boxer in with the UFC fighter that's going to take you to the ground or use their legs.
Right, right. If you knock a guy down in boxing, you can't just get on your knees and pummel him.
Right. Yeah.
I once saw a Jersey native and friend, Kurt Wepner.
Wepner, yeah, Chuck.
And he had an exhibition against Andre the Giant at Shea Stadium, which was an undercard fight. Andre the Giant, in about the second round, picked him up and threw him out of the ring. And Wepner was about 6'4" or 5" and 280 or 260 or something.
Yeah, he was a big guy, Chuck Wepner. Yeah.
But if Andre the Giant had to box him, forget it.
No, yeah, of course. He couldn't box him. No.
So, Larry, were you born and raised in the Philadelphia area?
No, I'm from New York.
Oh, you are.
I went off to Oklahoma University for my college education when I was 16. And then I worked around in the Army. I was at Stars and Stripes in Europe, Associated Press in Wilmington, North Carolina, Daily News.
Just for one moment, Larry. I happened to be on the cover of Stars and Stripes, just so you know.
You were?
I was on the cover of Stars and Stripes.
Why?
Excuse me?
Why?
Oh, nothing. It wasn't a good thing.
No?
No. I get a phone call. My family gets a phone call from Europe. It's my current, at the time I was married, and my wife's name was whatever, Bonnie. And her brother was in the service, and he was stationed in Germany, right? So that's where the Stars and Stripes, I guess, is promulgated out there. And the phone rings. It's someone from Europe. It's my brother-in-law. I want to know, is that our Michael on the front cover of the Stars and Stripes newspaper? So, yeah, I was on the cover. I was a New York City police officer that got jammed up. So I ended up on the front cover of Stars and Stripes. Johnny, have you been on the front cover of Stars and Stripes?
No, not on Stars and Stripes.
All right. So there you go. I beat you on that one. Not a very nice idea, though. Don't try to get there. That's the way I did.
So, Larry, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in New York.
In what town? What's it?
Brooklyn.
I was born in the Bronx. Then we lived in Upper Manhattan, way up in the 180s.
Right.
And then when I was 10, we moved to Brooklyn.
Okay.
Canarsie? Where? Canarsie, Crown Heights?
Bensonhurst.
Bensonhurst?
So, Larry, here's the thing about you. You know, and people talk about your career, talk about how humble you are, and do the people, when they see you on the street, still realize you're the same Larry Merchant? Do they still give you that attention?
I get it sometimes. I was in a grocery market recently, and some young girl who worked there came up to me and had recognized me. And I said to her, if I was 50 years younger, I'd be chasing you all over this.
I love it.
See, I'm not that bad.
I hope she said, "Don't worry, you can still chase me."
If you can catch me, you can have me.
Uh,
Oh gosh.
yeah, it's nice to see because guys like you just aren't around like they used to be. I mean, it's just a completely different world,
They're a dying breed.
different era, and I mean, for us, it's hats off to you, honestly. Who else would you say is one of the best people you were involved in announcing with in your career, as from a young man all the way up?
Well, I like Roy Jones. He really knew the inside of boxing, and he was a professional athlete, and he anticipated things and could see things that a journalist just doesn't have.
I thought Bobby Ches was, and not because I'm good friends with him, but I thought he was a great commentator too. He's very well spoken.
I like Bobby Ches. I saw him in what might have been his last fight,
Right.
at the Garden in the smaller room.
Felt for him.
Yeah.
And he was a good guy and a good fighter.
Yeah. We spent some time with him. He happens to be brilliant, by the way, like on the scale, on a brilliant scale. He's like a 160 or 180 IQ guy. Like he's really like so smart. He's weird, but he's a good soul. He's out there still.
How about guys like Duran? Were you ever announce a fight, Duran's fights?
Yes, Duran was one of the greats.
What's your opinion on that Duran No Mas fight with Leonard? Was it frustration, you believe, or is it something other than your opinion?
All I know is what I saw with my eyes. And what I saw with my eyes was just, he was frustrated. He knew he couldn't beat a Ray Leonard in their rematch, who would box like that, move all around. He couldn't handle him. No mas.
And here's another fight that was very controversial that, in my opinion, Hagler won. Hagler Leonard.
I thought Hagler won, but it was very close and it could have gone the other way.
Yeah.
But what happened in that fight was that Leonard won the drama of the fight.
100%.
He hadn't fought in a long while. He had overcome an eye operation.
Yep.
And not many people thought he was competitive against Hagler.
Yeah.
In fact, the day before the fight, I went to speak to Ray with some of my team members, and he was getting a massage. And he said, "Who do you like in the fight?" And I said, "Ray, I have to go with Hagler, but I hope I'm wrong." And I was wrong, and I was okay with that. I mean, it was a very close fight. It was a very close fight. And a fighter who wins the drama of the fight, which can include many different essences. For example, he was the underdog.
Right.
And the fans started to cheer as soon as they saw he was competitive.
Right.
And they were cheering through the fight. And close rounds
Gonna go to the
go to that fighter.
Yeah.
And so he won some of those close rounds, and he won the fight by a split decision, was it?
Yeah, it was split decision. Leonard knew how to steal rounds.
Yeah.
He knew how to light it up.
At the end of the round and so forth. Hagler never put on gloves again in his life.
Yeah.
And he was offered 10 figures, 8 figures, $10 million, I believe, which in today's money is probably 25 or 30
Right.
for a rematch.
Yeah.
He didn't want to do it anymore.
Well,
And-
Hagler wasn't.
And let me say this. Hagler lost the fight by not fighting like Hagler.
Yeah.
He wanted to prove
That he could.
that he could
Dance.
box with the great boxer.
Yeah. See, that's what guys
All
do.
of his life, he was envious of Leonard because Leonard became a star shooting right out of the 1976 Olympics,
The Olympics, yeah.
right? And Hagler had to do it the hard way. He had to beat 3 or 4 tough Philadelphia fighters, a couple of whom beat him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he thought that was the wrong thing to happen to him. And then he always swore, "You'll see real boxing when I fight Leonard."
Yeah.
That was not his game.
Yeah.
His game was when he came out against Hearns, punching his gloves in the corner. He was going to confront Hearns.
Yeah.
And boy, did he.
Yeah. Yeah. Leonard was a showman,
Right.
and Hagler was one of the greatest body punches I ever
It's
seen.
a grinder.
And Hagler didn't have the personality. He was very humble and quiet. That didn't know how to overwin the crowd the way Leonard did. Leonard just was a
He
great
didn't
showman.
stop. That was not his style.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Right.
He was a stalking, patient fighter to break you down.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a damn good thing if you can do it well on the
Right.
top level.
Yeah. Well,
But in
I
this
thought
case-
Hagler was a great fighter. I just thought he
I
never
do
got
too.
his due as a great fighter. He's one of the greatest ever also.
Look, if you ask me for one of my favorite fighters again, I'll tell you Hagler and Hearns.
Yeah.
It was 8 minutes of pure fury.
Yeah. They were great. All those fighters at
Not
that time.
Tyson Fury.
You had Antifermo and Hagler. You had Hearns and Leonard. You had that whole Duran, and it was such group of great fighters at that era.
Yeah. I have a trivia question for both you guys. Who was the first guy to knock down Sugar Ray Leonard?
Whoa.
You don't know it, do you?
No, I don't.
I don't know. I try to remember. Oh, Floyd Mayweather's father.
Maybe.
Who was it?
The kid.
It was
The
a
kid
fighter
from
boss.
Boston. The kid from Boston, Mickey.
Oh, Mickey Wood.
Mickey Ward's the first guy to knock him down.
Well, I think Floyd's father, Floyd Sr., might have stepped
On his foot.
on his foot.
The first official knockdown, from my understanding, was
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Mickey
don't-
Ward knocked him
I
down
don't remember it, but
Yeah.
okay.
in Madison Square Garden, though. Yeah,
Those were some great fights too, Ward and Gaddy.
yeah. Oh yeah. Later on,
Whoa.
war.
You didn't have to be a fight fan to love that.
You didn't have.
No.
Yeah. And what's that other guy? The Italian
You had
kid
the
from,
other
from Rhode
guy.
Island. The Rhode Island boom. What it was?
Boom Boom Mancini.
Boom Boom Mancini. Oh my God, those guys could swing.
All of those guys. Palomino back in those days. Palomino was a great
You
fighter.
didn't want to get in the ring with them guys because everyone was getting hurt.
So, Larry, do you miss it? Do you miss the action?
Look, I could see you there.
Oh, you know what? I had a great run.
All right.
I was very fortunate to be with HBO. I had never done it. I had done broadcasting, but not anything like being a commentator of a live event. But I had a great boss. His name is Seth Abraham, who ran the department. We're still pals. And once, after I had said something negative about one of our contract fighters, the blowback was that everybody was unhappy, okay? And he said to me, "Larry, you make my job harder."
Okay.
Meaning, when he went into a negotiation with a fighter I may have not adored. He heard about it,
Oh, well.
but then he said, keep doing what you do.
Sure.
I was lucky in that I had a boss like that.
Yeah.
Most guys,
Today you'd be in the woke society would have you canceled in a second. They'd cancel you right out. I mean,
well, there's so much money at stake today.
yeah, that's true.
And that's what it's about. When we had a new boss, in our first meeting, it wasn't a formal meeting, it was an informal meeting. He said to me, Larry, you got to lay off Floyd a little bit. There's hundreds of millions of dollars involved in this. I never laid off Floyd.
Fuck that.
You know, they hired me to be me,
Yeah.
Not to be them.
Can I love your personality because you pushed fighters.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody wants to see. They want to hear the truth come out of him, and you kind of brought it out of him one way or another,
Right.
which was unique.
Yeah, and it's good. Sometimes, occasionally controversial, which is good for a show. You're
It's
not
good
going
for a show. Yeah.
You're not going to get pap. But I never forgot that comment from my boss. You make my job harder, but keep doing what you do.
Keep doing what you do. That's what I keep telling John. He makes my job harder. And he says, keep doing what you do. So,
You know, we like to laugh, Larry. So we're all over, you know, we're doing shows and we do talks and lectures around different, you know, around the world and around this country, other countries. And, you know, basically most of it is just trying to be genuine and laugh at the same time.
There's no reason you can't laugh.
that's right. If you can't laugh, yeah. you might as well just
When
laugh.
I was a writer, I was part of a movement in the sports world that was the equivalent of what was called the new journalism, which was you hung around and hung around and hung around and got the real stories on the ground. And you told them. Some of them were, or most of them were good. Some of them were not. And I love that role. That you could be fun. There's no reason you can't have fun at what is a sports event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a sports event.
Yeah.
It's not life and death, although for fighters it might be a little bit of that.
Right.
But people come for entertainment. They come to
Entertainment.
cheer and root. And if you can give somebody at home a smile, hell, that's great.
Yeah, I don't like what they're doing now, Larry, in all the sports. They're bringing politics into sports.
They're ruining it.
And they're leaving people go to sports to get away from the real world and enjoy themselves and root and laugh. When you start bringing politics, in my opinion, they're diminishing the activity and the entertainment of the sport that you love, whether it's, you know, boxing, football, baseball, hockey, whatever.
Basketball.
You can't,
Basketball.
Basketball too.
you know, I once said something,
Your favorite friend in basketball? Yeah. Sorry, Larry.
it's all right. We were in El Paso, and the mayor of El Paso, I think he was concerned about the possibility of drug gangs coming out and disturbing the peace. I think Oscar De La Hoya was fighting.
He put on some good fights, didn't he, Larry?
Yes, he sure did. He
Yeah.
was a hell of a fighter. He fought everybody, didn't duck anyone.
Yeah, he didn't duck anybody. He was tough.
He fought everyone.
Fast.
I mean, fighting a guy like the great middleweight.
Arguello?
No, from Philadelphia, from West Philadelphia.
Oh, you're talking Bernard Hopkins.
Bernard Hopkins. It was suicide, but it was money. It was a thing, and he fought him. I don't know.
El Paso with the drug gang. The drug gangs. The mayor was worried about the drug gangs coming after the fight.
Yeah, and so word was passed to me in rehearsal. We do our rehearsal.
Right.
And in rehearsal, I remarked about the fact that they had made a deal with the promoter that there wouldn't be any beer sold at a fight. I never heard of a fight, a big fight, or maybe any fight where they make that kind of a deal.
Right.
And I thought, if you're at home, you should know this. And I told the story anyway. And it was a kind of riotous situation, but a good fight. And but nobody could blame it on having too much beer.
So it was still not a good scene. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, no, that's what I'm trying to say is that when I had a new head of the boxing division who wanted to build his reputation more than the fighters, that's what you come against. You know, he was concerned with how it would look and appear and how difficult it would make his job instead of how good, better it would make his department.
Yeah. You know, go back to Bernard Hopkins when you mention him. We used to train with him, Prince Badi, his trainer, Denny Brown. We were down at the Firehouse in Jersey. He had to be one of the most disciplined fighters I ever seen and one of the most intelligent fighters I ever seen.
Who is that?
Bernard Hopkins.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One of the greatest through history, I'd say.
he was determined when he got out of prison. He was determined almost not to drink anything stronger than ginger ale.
Yep, yep.
He was not going back in there.
No.
And in
Very,
West
very
Philly,
disciplined human being.
West Philly, there are people who would try to inspire you to go back in and take care of business or whatever. He was clear what he was going to do with his money. He invested it. He was articulate.
Yeah.
Once, after a fight, we had a thing, okay, at a fighter meeting. And it was something to do with his opponent. I'm not sure I recollect correct exactly. But there was some talk about it couldn't be a black fighter or something, and Bernard objected to the talk. You know, he didn't want to hear anything about that. He objected to it and said something nasty to our other fight guy, the guy we were talking about before. Who were we talking about before the fight? No, the fight the fight trainer and announcer from Detroit.
Oh, Bobby Ches.
No, from Detroit. You
from Detroit? Oh,
Manuel Stewart.
Stewart, right, yeah.
And he said something really nasty to Emmanuel Stewart. He called him I don't remember exactly. And I stood up and said, "You don't talk to my colleague like that." And he said, "F you." And about 7 FUs flew back between him and me. And I left the room, and so did the rest of our team. But that night after the fight, and we had an interview, and he said, Bernard said, "Larry," and it was a good interview, "Larry, you and I ought to take this show on the road." That was Bernard Hopkins.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
He was dedicated to the fight world. He was dedicated to his wife, to his family, and to success. And he did what he did, just what you said. He came out of jail. He didn't let anybody sideline him. And I had a lot of respect for him. We were down training with him all the time. And he did the right thing. He was a gentleman with us, with Bernard, with Prince Badi, and with Denny.
He wound up with Delaware's company.
Yep.
And would see him around all the time. Yep. And he was a good source of information about certain fights. So
he's got a cousin fight now. I don't know how he's doing now. I followed him a couple of years ago, but I'm not sure what he's doing now, the last couple of years.
He never mentioned it that I can recall.
Larry, the $6 million question. What do you think of Tyson? And just were you around him at all? Did you do some of his matches?
Yes, I did all of his matches.
You did all of his matches, huh?
Well, let me put it this way.
Big ones.
I went up to his promoter's office a couple of blocks from the HBO offices in Manhattan.
Right.
At the invitation of Jimmy Jacobs. Jimmy Jacobs is regarded as the Babe Ruth of handball. Totally ambidextrous, was a dominant figure in that world for decades. But he was also considered a great reference for the history of the game.
Of handball or boxing?
Well, in the boxing history.
Okay.
If you had a question about boxing history, call Jimmy Jacobs.
Okay.
So I go up to the office, and Jimmy sits me down in a little studio and plays a montage of the fighter I had never heard of, Mike Tyson. And this was Mike knocking everybody out early in his career, as most great fighters do early in their career.
Right.
But this was especially explosive. I took the montage up to my friend Seth Abraham, who I mentioned earlier.
Yep.
And I said, "You got to look at this. And here's an idea. Why don't we watch this guy as he grows, or doesn't, as he grows into a championship level fighter or implodes?" We've never done anything like it again. And he said to me, "Let me talk to our boss of bosses there, a guy named Michael Fuchs, who started HBO."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we went with. And we did one or two fights that weren't that impressive. And in fact, I once ran into Michael Fuchs on the street around there, and he said, "Tyson, you didn't get it right." I said, "You'll see." And we saw. And we carried him all the way through. until he tried to get me off of his telecast.
What's that about?
Because of some stuff I had said. I don't even remember what it was. And Seth Abraham said, no, you don't tell us who's going to broadcast our fights.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike Tyson stimulated sales at HBO to a very high degree. People wanted to see him. We hadn't seen a heavyweight like that since Marciano.
Yeah.
You know, so that settled down after a while. And then when his contract ran out, he moved to Showtime. Mike did. So we weren't friends anymore. I don't remember what I said. It couldn't have been that bad. But I do know this. We were in Tokyo for the Tyson Douglas fight. I want to show you something. Hold on.
Buster Douglas.
Yeah.
It was sent to me by Douglas's manager. Mike Tyson, fight of the century.
Yeah.
Wow. Upset of the century.
That's one of my favorite fights too, by the way.
Well, it was the incredible jab of Buster Douglas that was,
Set it all up.
yeah, set it up.
And Douglas is a great story. His father, who I had seen fight at the Garden, you mentioned Teddy Brenner before. Brenner brought him in against a fighter who was giving him a problem on who to fight. So he says, well, we have this kid in Ohio, and just an average middleweight. Well, Buster Douglas comes to New York and beats the guy, and I don't remember who. And then we learned the backstory that his father had a gym in Columbus, that Buster didn't really love fighting. He was a big kid, 6'1" or 2, 3, who liked to play basketball and had a scholarship to a small college out there. And so he and his father didn't quite connect. And then his mother died 2 weeks before the fight with Tyson.
Yeah.
And Douglas was the only fighter we ever saw who skipped into the ring instead of, as if he was something good was gonna happen for him. Instead of making this solemn walk, knowing that nothing good was gonna happen.
Yeah.
That's that.
That was incredible.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that replay of that he skipped into the ring.
Yeah.
Well, after the fight, as you may remember, Buster was so overwhelmed with emotion. And I was going to get to what happened with his mother and how that might have energized him and so on. But I felt it would be better if he spoke about it first. And he was trying, but he couldn't get it out. And there was about a 25 or 30-second silence from the guy I was trying to interview. And something in my head said, just let this go. Let people see the truth. And after a bit, Douglas pulled himself together. His handlers were trying to take him away to the back of the building and started to speak. When people ask me what interview I most remember, it's not the one with Floyd Jr. It's the one with Buster Jr.
Yeah.
And that was an amazing event.
I thought he had a child that was sick. Maybe it was the next fight after that.
Who, Buster?
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but I know his mother died a few weeks
Yeah.
before the fight.
How about two other questions, Larry Holmes, and what do you think of Tyson Fury now? As
I think Larry Holmes was an excellent fighter, but he had one big handicap. He was following Ali.
Ali,
Yeah.
100%. That was
Ali made boxing.
yeah, very hard act to follow.
Yes,
Yeah.
not hard, impossible.
Yeah. Well, Muhammad Ali again, his personality, showmanship, and then Larry was actually pretty funny as the years went on, and he had some good one-liners himself.
Listen, I grew up.
Yes,
with that
Larry, you're
You
right
had
about
Foreman, Frazier, Ali, right? And then what? Spinks came along or something like that. But what a golden era.
that. He said
to watch.
something about Marciano. Somebody asked him about boxing Marciano, and he laughed. And anyway, he's a good soul. I was at his house. The only swimming pool I ever saw shaped like a boxing glove.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you had great fighters. You had Ron Lyle, you had George Foreman, you had, Bone Crusher Smith, that was a big guy, later on got involved with the boxing commission and
Yeah,
stuff.
but it was the golden era of boxing, as far as I'm concerned, right back around then.
Well, the last era was always the golden era. Now, but
Yeah, but Ali changed the game. He made the game. Whatever it was prior to that. Of course, I wasn't really aware of boxing in the '60s, but with Ali and the whole draft thing and changing his name from Cassius Clay.
I have to say something here. You talked about social events should not be on sports events because people are trying to get away from the real world. A lot of people didn't like Ali because he did exactly that. He was the first one to use the loudspeaker of television about racial issues, then about religious issues. And when he fought Frazier, a lot of people, especially white people, were rooting for Frazier.
It's true.
Because Frazier was a hell of a fighter and an action fighter, but also because he was an anti-Ali.
That's very true. That is very true.
Not well spoken in that regard,
Right.
although he had a great story to tell. But Ali opened the door for that, for all sports.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there is a point to he had a point to that. Yeah. Yeah. But I think it was listen, and I'm not an expert on this, but I think Larry would probably maybe agree with this. I think he handled it differently, though. He wasn't looking to be divisive. He was looking to be inclusive.
True that.
Yes.
It was true, but
Does that make sense to you, John? I mean, I mean, we were young guys back then, Larry. You were obviously a mature adult male, but back then, the way he wanted to be more inclusive than divisive. And to me, that's okay if you want to. You know what I mean? Let's build a broad coalition rather than I don't like you because you're red, you're blue. I don't like you because that's not the way. I go to an arena, Larry, and for me, this was my position. I go to a sports arena. I want to high five you. I don't care who you were into, what you like, what you don't like. Right now, we're rooting for the New York Rangers, baby. In 7 yesterday, in overtime, they won.
Were there good fights on the ice?
They don't fight on the ice like they
much
used to.
anymore. But I think the other day there was a couple good fights. I didn't see any the other night.
Look, Larry became the anti-Ali in that sense, but he was not the dramatic figure that
Right.
Ali was,
Right.
and didn't come along during the war in Vietnam,
Yeah.
which polarized the whole country. So that outburst and that Ali's natural effusive personality, which might have gone elsewhere in another time, there was the war, people were for it or against it, and
Yeah, it was a big.
we never had a war where the whole country wasn't behind us.
Right.
So that was that. It was highly unusual for any athlete to get in front of a microphone and talk about anything except being an athlete.
Right.
And that was fine in its time, but that blew the cover off everything. And then you had the murder of
Sonny Liston.
Martin Luther.
not Martin Luther. He died a few thousand years ago. But what's it?
Sonny Liston, you're talking about the controversy?
No. I'm talking about the minister,
Martin Luther King.
No, you're talking about
who was assassinated.
yeah, you're talking about who we had Lee Roslin on. You're talking about
Malcolm. Malcolm.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X, yeah. So he could hardly avoid it. People were asking him, reporters were asking him about these things all the time. Yes, he changed his name. I don't know of any other athlete who changed his name in mid-career or an early career for that matter.
It was already famous as Cassius Clay.
But that was an extension of being a Muslim.
Right.
And all of his experiences. And then he had other issues. He was a star at the 1960 Olympics.
Right.
Because not for anything political, but because he was so much fun, because he was collecting all these pins and everything and trading them with others and so forth. He won the light heavyweight gold medal. So it was a different time, and he happened to be the guy who came along and dramatized how different it was from any time before or even after.
So Larry, what do you think now of 6'6", 6'7" Tyson Fury?
6'9", 6'8".
Is he that big?
Yeah,
6'9". He's and he can move. I never seen a guy that can move at that size.
You are correct. Nobody has. I first heard about him when he was sparring with the Klitschko's, maybe.
Yep, with the Klitschko's, yep.
And the fact that he was a boxer, that's how he would try to impose himself on opponents, by boxing them at that height and the reach advantage he had.
Yeah.
And when he went in there and beat up
Wilder,
I have never seen any prize fighter in his about 30s, after a long career as a boxer, which was counterintuitive how you expect the biggest guy in there in the ring to do. I had never seen anybody make that kind of change where he just went from pure boxer to aggressor.
His camp
so I
stays in
admire him
touch
for
with
that.
me.
I admire him for that. He knew he
Yeah.
had to do that.
You know what makes him a true champ, lad? And you know this too. His camp stays in touch with me. His cousin's also a fighter, and they stay in touch with me. But what made me realize he's a champ is when he hit the canvas, like guys like Leonard or different guys, and they get up and they come back and they take
Yeah.
that fight.
I
You know he has a champ quality in him.
I saw the first fight with Wilder, which is a terrific fight. 4 knockdowns in the fight, 2 each. You know, he had such a fascinating background where he grew up as an Irish itinerant gypsy kind of guy.
Yep.
In a particular group of people, of guys who boxed, including his father,
Yes.
that he probably was throwing jabs when he was 2 years old.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Where in Philadelphia, they threw the left hook when they were in their cribs.
Yeah.
This is funny. Larry, it's been really, Johnny, it's been really a pleasure with Larry. I mean, I don't want to keep him on too much longer, but unless you got something, what do you got?
Larry,
Uh-oh, here he goes.
can you see
Can
that?
you see that?
Not, I could see something going on, but I
I'm
don't know.
3
what
years
it is.
old, jabbing my brother at 4.
Yeah,
So-
you could have been
it could have been a contender.
right.
You grow up with gloves on. So, you know, that's that world.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Larry, listen, it's been more than a pleasure and an honor. And
It's just,
I mean, it's incredible. And for people to hear you talk is, I know to yourself because you're you, it's not a big deal, but to the world it is.
This is great.
And you're humble as shit. So
This is great.
honestly, it's been great.
All right. I'll see you when I turn 110.
We'll be out there. We'll come look you up.
We're going to look you up. We want you back
We're
again.
gonna come out there and see you, if that's all right with you. If you let us on your front porch.
Hold on.
All right, Larry. God bless you. Thank you so
God
much.
bless you, Larry. You and your family. Thank you.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. John Alite. Good, Johnny.
True John Alite on Instagram, website johnalite.com for books, memorabilia, shows, comments on the great Larry Merchant. Please, anybody has any comments and we'll answer. And again, hats off to you, Larry. Thank you very much.
The Mike Dowd on Instagram. And did you change your life?
Yes, I did.
Hashtag.
Go in the right direction, everybody. Enjoy your life. You have one at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, guys.